Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Alright. So did you actually watch the stream last time?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How did that go? Was it?
It was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can hear all of us too.
It's definitely better being here, but it's the second best thing.
Yeah. I was just wondering, if it worked, if it was okay, or it's too laggy, or audio was horrible.
I mean, no, I didn't see any lag.
Sweet. So there is a pretty significant lag, but you probably don't realize it when you're not here. So.
Okay.
You touch them, I think it's supposed to be like each time you touch it goes. I thought it was. You hold it, and then you hold it again. I thought it was each half until you got to the bottom. Yeah, you hold it, there you go.
Everybody have a good weekend? Anything exciting? No.
How about you?
Not really. So my church participates in what's called Clarendon Day, which is in the city of, well, I guess it's not even a city, it's just in Arlington, but the Clarendon community, there's just like a big street fair. So I went over and did that for a few hours on Saturday, and then barbecue and church yesterday, and then, yeah. It's all family. I went home and played with my nephews for a while, which was fun. Yeah.
When you say barbecue, do you mean the American style barbecue? Like you cook a slow cooked meat?
Yes. yeah. So, yeah, I mean, actually yesterday we didn't even do a true, like, American barbecue, like outside on a grill, because it was raining. So it was crock pot pulled pork, but it was pretty good. Yeah. Yeah, not too bad. All right. While we're waiting for everybody else to show up, I know Josh, you were interested in this. You're going to go through the Surge Lab, which is one way of deploying a website out to the internet. It's going to give you some like fake named, like it just chooses a random name every time to set up a subdomain, they're called, where you can go and look at your website. I'm going to set something up for us to work on that works in the same way that the Learn and Get to repo works, where every time you push up a new branch, that branch becomes available for you to go look at on the internet. And I know you were interested in how that was set up, so I'm going to walk through doing that right now. And it'll be recorded, so you can go look at the YouTube channel to see it. So the way this works, you go into AWS, you can get a free account, and I'm pretty sure that everything that I'm going to do here is available on the free tier, except you will have to purchase a domain in addition to what I'm doing. Domains usually cost $10 to $15 a year, so it's not that expensive a cost, but you do have to do that. And then all you do, once you get signed into AWS, it's gonna look like this. You're gonna go to S3, it's called. S3 is Simple Secure Storage, I believe is what it stands for. It's basically just a place to store files on the internet. It's nothing particularly fancy, but we're going to create what's called a new bucket, which is really just a folder in S3. We create a bucket. Typically, you want to name the bucket whatever your website is going to be. So in our case, it's just going to be responsive.flatiron-dc.com. And it doesn't really matter what you choose for the region. You probably want to choose something that is closer to where most of your users are going to be than far away. So most
they store it.
Because it'll actually literally be stored. So in this case, I think it's somewhere in Northern Virginia. I don't know exactly where the farm is. We could have chosen US East, which would have been in Ohio, which is a little bit further away. Could have chosen US West, which is in California. You could choose China, like you could go anywhere. But it's actually going to be stored in the cloud, but at a particular location.
And that bucket name that you've given it, that is the domain name that you actually bought.
So far I've purchased flatiron-dc.com. Anytime you see a something dot and then something.org.com, whatever, it's called a subdomain.
Yeah.
So once you own flatiron-dc.com, you can create as many subdomains as you want.
Yeah.
So we're going to create, I haven't done it yet, but we're going to create a subdomain called responsive.flatiron-dc.com.
Cool. And you're just waiting on the big buyout offer from Flatiron for that.
Yes, that's right, exactly. That's why it's being recorded, so they can see. Yeah. So you don't have to worry about any of these other settings, actually. They're all completely fine. You can just keep clicking next and then create the bucket. And then you'll see your buckets actually in here, right here. So flatironresponsivedc.com. If we click into that and then go to management, I always forget exactly where this is. Permissions, properties, there we go. There's an option for static web hosting. So if we just click into that, we want to say use this bucket to host a website, and we're going to expect that index.html is going to be the root of whatever's inside of that bucket. And we're going to say save. And we're almost there. So we have our S3 bucket. This is where we're going to put all of our files on branches. So the branches will become a folder inside of there, and I'll show you what that looks like in the GitLab one in just a second. Second step is to go to Route 53. Route 53 manages all the domains in AWS. So these are your DNS entries, domain name servers. You're going to have hosted zones. So for every domain that you buy will be a different hosted zone. We'll click into there and we'll see I have flatirondc.com right here. Somehow I have it twice. That's weird. That shouldn't happen to you. But if I go into there, you'll see I've already set up front end previewer, recordings, wedding, etc. So we're going to add a new one. Create record set, and we're just going to call it responsive. And then we're going to choose alias, and we're going to choose our S3 bucket. You see it auto-populates it already right here for us. Sometimes it takes a few minutes. You might have to refresh the page a few times or wait a few minutes and come back and do it again, but it should show up here. And then you click create. Alright, so now we have our website. It'll point to that bucket. If we went there right now, it's probably not quite there. So the way domain name servers work is basically we've created a record on the internet, and AWS, being a provider like it is, has its own domain name servers. And so the domain name servers reach out to these people and say, hey, where do you want me to route people? Right? So you own flatirondc.com. Where do you want me to actually send them? And AWS will say send them to that bucket. Right? It takes a little while to populate throughout the internet because currently responsive.flatiron-dc.com didn't exist anywhere in the world. So it'll take a minute for it to populate out, so it might take a minute before it actually shows up on the web, but then you should be good to go. The last piece of this is we have to actually make it so that whenever we push a branch, we automatically take all of those files and put them into that bucket. And so the way we can do that, and you can look at our existing learning Git 2. So there's this .gitlabci.yaml, which we talked about a little bit before. You can just copy that whole thing. We'll go back to I've already created this responsive repo, right? It doesn't have anything in it, it's just a responsive repo. We'll create a new file. So, plus new file. paste those things in there. We just need to make sure that we actually name it .gitlab-ci.yaml. And we're going to want to change frontend.flatiron-gc.com to responsive. And then this full command is basically saying, hey, go ahead and sync with that folder whatever is on my branch currently. So all it's saying is go ahead and sync to S3, in particular to this bucket, and then to this folder. The CI commit ref name will reference whatever your branch name is. I want to delete everything that's there right now, and I want to push everything except for what's in our .git folder. So don't push up the stuff that we're keeping on Git, but push everything else up. And then we commit the changes here, and we're good to go. So now anytime you push to a branch, it'll push it up there and it'll actually show up. I can show you in our front ends right now. So if I go look at S3, so you can see all of these are all of our branches. They've just been pushed up there, and inside of each one of these is all the files from that branch. And that gets served to the internet, and it'll look at index.html, and it'll serve it up just like you're doing on your local computer. So,
Cool.
yeah, that's it. This whole thing.
Thanks for taking us through that.
Yeah, no problem. And then we'll actually build our websites for the project using this instead of Surge. Not to say it's not good to go through the Surge labs and learn how that works, but this is a more common paradigm for development, and you don't have to learn anything about Surge to make it work. It'll just work by pushing your branch. So.
Cool.
Yep.
Just to check, because I missed the Wednesday.
Yep.
On the, is everyone up to the start of week 4 or halfway through?
No, so we just got to the start of week 4. If you read week 4, but week 4, you'll see it's really just work on the project.
Yeah.
So there's not much there. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I don't know. Were you able to watch the videos by any chance? The YouTube videos?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so they are all available. Do you know if they? Okay, so if you look at our Slack in our channel, pinned to the side. So if you're not there, there's a pin at the top. Pinned to the side are 8 items. It's like the, let's see, 6th item down, https www.youtube.com/channel. If you click on that, you'll see all of our past courses recorded. And so then,
You just do screen or voice as well?
voice as well, and it's recording my face and the screen. Hey Jen, you're downstairs, I'm assuming.
last week was my wife's birthday.
Okay.
So, but, so I don't know what it was last week. It would be enough to
Cool. Yeah, the CSS is going pretty well. A couple spots have been stuck in. We just gotta Google it and figure out, what to do. But yeah, it's going good.
feel like you have your thing you want to do, and then you get the bones of that, and then you spend most of your time like chipping away all the little things that are wrong with it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you get your box up and you get your content in, and then you spend a while formatting the CSS,
Right.
and moving stuff, and learning as you
Because
go.
like everything like interacts with everything else you've got, and then you do something else and it messes up something,
Yeah, totally.
But yeah.
The frame of reference, the frame of mind that I've been trying to use is like spends, focus on processes of output.
Mm-hmm.
So like if I spend 2 25-minute blocks, I should just be happy with that per day, and because you learn so much from doing and
Absolutely.
thinking it through rather than like necessarily having beautiful output at the end.
Mm-hmm.
There's that struggle where you learn so much
Right.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when I first started, you just want to finish the thing
Mhm.
and get the output.
Right.
And yeah, I think I found it more useful to just focus on process.
Absolutely. And for me, repetition, just kind of going back and looking at what I did after I did it, just seeing everything that I've been doing. I've been playing around with creating like my own website stuff. Nothing fancy so far. I'm just kind of applying it
Yeah.
outside of the coursework. So
What tools are you using for that?
I'm just using Atom pretty much,
Yeah.
and I'm just creating another folder of the index and CSS and doing that. So,
Cool.
Yeah.
And then you just load it on the browser locally.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't push anything.
Yep.
Outside.
Hey, there we go.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started by I created a new repo for us to be able to work on our projects as we start this week. So let's go ahead and start by getting that Git repo onto our computers and checking out a branch where you can start to do your work. I'll go from there. So how do we get a brand new repo onto our local computer? Is one we haven't done for a minute.
If you get onto GitLab and grab the
So you want to go to GitLab, and we want to search for responsive as the project, which I just realized really should have made you guys a team to make this a little bit easier, but it's all right. Oh, actually, maybe. I just need to add you as members here. So I am going to have to get your usernames again. So does anybody know what their GitLab username is?
Can you give my email? Please?
It's probably,
I think it would be Joshi23. Yeah, Joshi23.
And you channel in 1, 2, 3 like that.
yep.
Mine is just Shakara.
Sorry, Chen, what's yours?
You channel in 1, 2, 3.
and I'm Josh Daniel NZ.
Okay, cool. So now if you go to GitLab, and you can go to groups if you want. Your only group should be Flatiron DC, and you'll see all the projects that are in Flatiron DC, one of which is going to be responsive. So you want to go inside of there. And then what do we need to click on this screen?
And copy icon.
Yeah, the copy icon is to file, say copy URL to clipboard. And then what do I need to do?
Go back to terminal.
Yep.
Get into the folder where you want it.
Yep, so make sure you get into the right directory. So in your case, that's going to be cd /code. which is in your user directory in the code folder. And inside of there, you should see your learning-git2. So if you type ls, you should see learning-git2. If you type pwd, you should see users slash your username slash codes, and then, yeah, and that's where you should be.
This was a git clone.
So then git clone, and then we paste what we've gotten, and that is going to pull the repo down for us. No, it's lots of steps. Yeah.
So what do we want to copy from responsive?
So you want to copy on the project homepage, which should look like this.
Yep.
There's an SSH git at gitlab.com. There's a copy button right there.
Okay.
You can click on it and put it on your clipboard. And then you can open up terminal, git space clone space.
Why SSH rather than HTTP?
So if you can do the HTTP version, but it'll ask you for your username and password every time you try to pull and push. With the SSH version, because we set up that ID RSA key at the beginning of class, you don't have to do that because that key acts as your password to authenticate you. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so if you did the HTTPS version, you probably want to just delete that directory and do it again. So you don't have to do that all the time.
Gotcha. Yeah. So there's a security layer for some of this administering GitLab.
Yeah, so basically if you remember, when you went and we went and clicked on SSH keys on your user profile and pasted the public version of the key. So that public version checks your private version. So every time you push or pull, it sends that private version up and it checks to make sure like that matches the public version. So it can say, yes, this is actually Josh. I know it's him because he logged into me and he told me that this is his SSH key. So that's how it's authenticated.
Okay, we did CD tilde, is it space tilde?
Yeah, CD space tilde slash
Space.
nope slash code enter, and then if you type ls, it should list the learning git 2, and if you type pwd, enter, it'll show you your users, your username directory slash code. So you're in the right place. So now if you do git space clone, and then go to, so press up, space, and then you need to go to GitLab
And copy.
and copy, paste it right there. I already have it. Yep. There you go.
All right, so then once it's cloned onto your computer, we go ahead and CD into that folder, which is called responsive. And then if you type pwd, it should say that you're now inside of, in your case, code/responsive. If you ls, you'll just see a README file.
If I accidentally put it in the learning git, can I delete it?
Yeah, so the easiest way to do that is if you're still inside a learning git. Well, let's find that.
I can just do remove, right?
Yep. But you'll have to do -rf because it needs recursively, which is what the R is, and force deletion.
Like that.
Yep, and then space responsive. Recursive means go through all the files and all the directories inside of that thing. Yep. So CD. Yeah, there you go. Just do it. Got it.
All right, so when you're inside of here, we're just going to create a branch for each of you. So the easiest way to do this is just git checkout -b and then your name. And if you type git status, it should say on branch, your name, nothing to commit, working tree clean. And then we're going to, this is where you're going to actually build your websites from. But for the moment, we can just git push origin your name, and then I should see that your branches actually start showing up here.
So you can do that even if you haven't added or committed stuff.
Yep.
It's empty.
Yep. So you'll see actually though.
Remember when we talked about the commit shells and it being a version at a particular point in time? So my branch and Shen's branch and master are all at the same version.
Right.
And it knows that. So it's basically like I just created an exact duplicate from that version. Go with it.
And then from there, if we want to start building our website, it's probably useful to go through this exercise. What are the files that I need to actually create a website?
You're gonna need the, I guess, the index HTML file,
Yep,
the CSS file.
Yep.
And the JS file.
yep. And so the easiest way to get this is to just go to learning-get2
Copy.
and copy. So you can just copy all three from there and put it in here. And you can do that inside of your Finder if you want. So you can go your Finder, go to your home directory, and then in your case code. In my case it's Flatiron DC. And then learning-get2 and just copy the 3 files. But only those 3 files. Don't delete anything. Don't copy anything else. None of the dot files. And then paste them. By the way, neat little trick to like open up index.html. You can just type the word open when you're inside of this directory and then index.html and it'll just open it in the browser for you instead of having to go find it in the Finder window.
So I'm pasting that into where? Sorry.
Pasting.
Oh, so just copy. I was just so.
So I copied those 3 from learning to.
Yep. So now if you go into, well, you're just in the Finder.
Okay.
Just go to your user directory. Basically. Okay. So did you clone your responsive directory into somewhere else? So your terminal. So type pwd. So you put it inside of just your user directory.
Yeah, okay.
So the easiest way to do that, to change this, you go back to terminal, do mv, which is move,
Okay.
space, responsive, space, code, slash, dot. Okay, press up. Yeah, that looks okay. So go back to the terminal, delete all that. Just take out last. So you're in the responsive directory. So cd space dot dot, and then press up a couple times to press the command. Okay, now if you cd into code. CD and responsive. So now if you like your Finder window, you should be able to go inside of code and then inside of responsive space.
So then Adam, I can just add a project folder to the tab, to the side navigation, right?
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, that's what we're doing.
Okay. So does everybody have? So if you type get status now, you should see the 3 files have been modified. They're marked as untracked because they're brand new. So we haven't ever added or committed these before. So you should see something that looks like this. And then if we want to push that up to our branch, how do we do that?
A couple things.
What's that?
Couple things to do.
A couple things to do. So what do we need to? What are the commands we need to do to actually get it to push up to our branch?
Get space period.
Yep, get space as space period, and then
Get commit dash m a message.
yep. So we can usually you call this your initial commit, and then what's the last one?
Get push origin branch name.
Yep, get push origin branch name. Which is just your name at this point. So then if I go look at the branches, looks like everybody has one but Josh right now. Oh, maybe it's just not. Hold on. There we go. Everybody has one. You're good. And now as people are pushing those changes, the commits, remember before they were all the same as master, and now they're changing because now we have slightly different commits. Cool. All right. So then if we want to start developing our website, we just have to open up our index.html, which you can do by either going in your Finder and double clicking on the index.html file, or you can just type open index.html inside of the terminal and it'll open up for you. And from this point forward, you can just start putting whatever HTML and CSS and JavaScript you want. You can start actually creating your website. So we will spend a decent amount of time today where you guys are allowed to do that, where you can just work through the project. The project has some pretty basic requirements. It's in week 4, portfolio project, responsive brochure site. There's a set of requirements in there. So your site must use HTML5 semantic elements for grouping content. Your HTML must pass validation. Your CSS must pass validation. Your site must use at least one of the following: multi-column with floats, flexbox, or CSS grid. You must include at least 3 images. Deploy your site to web hosting. In your case, it's literally just push it to your branch and it'll be there. And then your site must be optimized for at least 2 viewports, a full screen device as well as a mobile device. Okay, so you have to basically, it should be the case that when we make things smaller, at some point it should look nice, and when we make it larger, it should look nice. The easiest way to develop for the responsive piece is when you have your inspector open. If you click on the little tablet toolbar, you can then choose sizes. You can choose sizes, so you could choose, say, an iPhone X, and it'll resize it. And if you uncheck it, then it'll tell you what the screen size is in the upper right-hand corner as you resize your screen. You can also, if you leave that on, you can just change it to responsive and then explicitly state what size you want your screen to be. But you just have to have 2 sizes where it looks nice. That's the goal. Questions about what we're trying to accomplish there? Okay. So I'm going to give most of the class for you to be able to start working on that, and I can be here to help you along with it. Before we do that, though, I do want to do our normal review of JavaScript stuff, just so that we have a little bit more practice with that. It's been a few days. So in order to do that, let's actually go back to our terminals. Let's cd up a directory to learning.git. And if you don't want to follow along with the coding on this piece, that's fine. It's more conceptual still because we're not actually there yet. But if you want to follow along with the coding, cd .. learning-git2, which will go up a directory and then into the learning-git2 directory. In there, you may be on a branch. If you're on a branch, make sure you add and commit and push everything. And then you can check out master. And then for master, we'll just check out a new branch called your name JavaScript week 4 day 1. Just so we'll be very explicit about it. And you should be in a state where your JavaScript looks something like this. Alright, so we're going to go through, and I know this is somewhat repetitive, but it's good to just keep practicing over and over and over again. So what is a variable?
A variable is an alias used for substitution.
And variable is an alias. We use it for substitution. Once a variable has been set, you can use the value it's been set to anywhere along the chain. So for example, if I say color equals blue, and then I say blue equals color, and then I say x equals blue, and then I say console.log x. What's going to show up on my website in the console? Why color?
Because blue equals color. And wait.
You can go either way. Did you put both of them there?
Do things in quotes or what shows up?
Oh no.
Yes.
That's a good
Okay.
thing.
Yeah, so if we follow this backwards, right, we're saying, okay, I want to display X. What is X? Well, X is blue. Well, what is blue?
Color.
Blue is color. Well, what is color? Color is blue. Right, and so once we get to a non-variable, so all of these other ones that aren't inside of quotes are not, they're variables, right? So color is a variable, blue is a variable, and X is a variable. So if we want to find out what it's going to print, we have to follow it all the way back up the chain to where we get to something that is not a variable but is an actual thing. Does that make sense? But it's all about substitution, right? It's just about, okay, blue is color, cool. So then I can find anywhere after this that I see color, and I can make it blue. Okay, so blue is blue, okay, cool. So I can find anywhere that's blue after that, and I can make it blue as a string. Okay, X is blue, okay, I can find anywhere after that, right? And so what we actually are logging is blue.
Okay, so if we say that HTML is the content on your site,
Yep.
and CSS is the design,
Yep.
then JavaScript is the behavior.
Yep.
So the idea with JavaScript is that you are processing a lot of information, and is this only when people are inputting or pulling things from your site?
So JavaScript is really about when you want to make modifications based on user interactions or based on data that you're pulling from outside of your website into your site. So like if somebody clicks on a button, the only way to do anything about that is through JavaScript.
Okay.
So they click on a button, okay, now I want to save the form, which means I want to send some data out. Or they click on a button, so that means I want to change the theme from being a dark theme to being a light theme. So I'm going to use JavaScript to change the CSS of the page.
Okay.
Or they click on a button, that means they want to delete something, so I'm going to remove the item from the list. Okay, so JavaScript does all the functional, behavioral things that happen on the site. Does that make sense? And so we'll start to get into that, especially next time. We'll see, we might do an example on this exercise. But okay, so that's what variables are. So what are functions?
Functions are rules that the variable goes through.
Sometimes variables go through them, which is what we talk about with parameters. But what is a function? Why do they exist? What's the purpose of a function?
A set of statements that performs a task or calculates a value.
Yep. So it's really, so here we're gonna try and, like, memorization is not a thing that I typically try to push because I think largely understanding concepts requires a little bit more abstraction and looking at things from different angles. In these cases, I think it's valuable to have an explicit definition that we can all repeat and we understand as a mantra. So variables are aliases. They're things we use for substitution. So can we just say that? Variables are aliases, something we use for substitution. Okay. Functions allow us to group code together and make that code reusable. Okay. Functions are things we group together that allow us to So functions are things that allow us to group our code together that make that code reusable. Okay. So I'm gonna write
Functions. Blocks of code.
What's that?
Why don't you just say blocks of code?
So they're blocks of code, but like technically,
it could be not together.
it could be not together, and in particular, they're not. A block of code might not be reusable.
Okay.
So I could write the code outside of a function, and technically it's a block of code, but I can't reuse that code. I have to copy and paste that code,
Gotcha.
which is the difference. So functions are a way to group our code and make that code reusable. Okay. So let's create a function that is going to sum two numbers together. Okay. So how would we do that? If I'm going to give it two numbers and I want to get back the sum, how do I do that?
So first we want to identify, well, we're going to first name the function.
Okay. So how do we do that?
Function
Yep.
sum.
Sure.
And then we want to put the parentheses.
Yep. What do we want to put inside the parentheses? So remember, I want a function that's going to sum two variables.
Can
What's that? So that's where we're going to go. But
we just put a random variable like y?
okay, so let's skip this for a second. So how do we continue to define this function?
Curly brackets.
Yep, curly brackets. All right, and then what do we want to do inside of here?
Well, I don't know for sure, but I would identify some variables. So I would declare x.
Okay.
X equals 3.
Okay.
I'm going to declare y. Y equals 46.
Okay.
That's right. And then I would be, couldn't I just be done with that and then under that return like a console.log x plus y?
Yeah, so let's just do return x plus y. And then what we'll do is console.log, because what do you have to do with a function?
You gotta call it.
You have to call it. So how do I call this function?
Sum with the parentheses.
Yep, sum with the parentheses. So and then I can do whatever I want with that. So for example, I could create a sum of 3 and 46 equals sum, for example, and then I can console.log our variable.
Oh, I see.
So when we return x plus y, what we can do is take that value and assign it to a variable or use that value somewhere, and then we can use that variable or the value somewhere. So
because if we were able to console.log x plus y, but then what you're saying is we wouldn't be able to use that again anywhere else.
yeah, because all we would do is continue console logging it. We wouldn't actually be.
So we want to take that number somewhere. We have to declare it as another variable.
Yep. So this is great for summing 3 and 46, but what if I want to sum 5 and 42?
Then
Remember, so functions, the big thing is that it makes our code reusable.
right.
So this code is really just summing 3 and 46.
So could you declare x, declare y, have the sum be the sum of x plus y, and then console.log the name of the sum variable? If that makes sense.
So here's what I'm suggesting. There's nothing reusable about this code, right? Because as it sits right now, yes, we can do this and it will work the way that you expect it to. But if I want to reuse sum to add 5 and 10 or 43 and 62 or 59 and 76, I can't do that right now because all it's capable of doing is adding exactly what I put inside of the function. So what's that thing that we use in functions that allows us to change what it does?
So to use change words like declare the x and y, but as arguments.
As arguments, as parameters. So if we do x comma y, then what can I do if I want to sum 3 and 46, for example?
Put the 3, 46 right there.
Yeah. So you see that? So now this code is completely reusable and I can sum any two numbers together that I want simply by calling sum and then the two numbers.
It's the same thing.
It's the same thing. That gives you the exact same result as what you just did with the other code. Does that make sense?
Okay, where's this? Are you changing the sum of 3 and 46?
Say that one.
What is sum of 3 46.
This,
Yes.
that's a variable.
Okay, so you just made it up. Like, I don't get it where that's coming from.
I'm making it up. It's a variable. It's a variable that I'm setting equal to whatever is returned from our function sum 3 and 46.
Okay.
So it's going to be equal to, so remember, in functions, when you do it this way, it's like setting x equal to the first parameter and y equal to the second parameter. So at this point, x is going to be what?
3.
3, and y is going to be what?
46.
46. So what is sum 3 comma 46 going to be?
X and Y.
Well, so it's going to be x plus y, right? Which is 49, right? So sum of 3 and 46 is going to be
Yeah.
49. Again, so functions, again, when they're returning a value are a lot like variables in that, like, you're going to be able to substitute them out for whatever their result is going to be.
Okay, so it doesn't matter what you call that? The part that says sum of 3 and 46?
No, it could be sad.
Okay.
I only called it sum of 3 and 46 because we were explicitly summing 3 and 46 at the time. But, does that make sense? Okay. So, and the nice thing about this, right, is that I can
So this word sad, is that a variable as well?
yeah, it's a variable.
Can we see this in our browser?
Yeah, so here, if I go back over here and open up flat iron. Oh, because I didn't open this. I opened. Oops. There we go.
Let's see if I got it.
So then the nice thing, right, is I can call this over and over and over again. So I can sum 3 and 46, but I can also sum 5 and 46 or 5 and 87 or whatever you want. And it'll do all of those things. Right? So it's reusable grouping of code. Right? That's the big thing about functions. They allow us to reuse a group of code. Questions about that? Okay. So that's functions. Last time we went over what's called anonymous functions. That's a little bit more complicated. Does anybody remember what an anonymous function is or why we use them?
I had nightmares about it.
Yeah. And I get it. I want to do it one more time because we're going to use them extensively. You don't have to completely understand what's going on, but we are going to use them extensively once we get to manipulating the DOM, when we actually start messing with what our web page looks like. Callbacks or anonymous functions are things that are very commonly used when you say, okay, when I click on something, I want to call this anonymous function. And so I want to give you some insight into what that is and how that works. So does anybody remember anything about how these guys work? Yeah, well. Okay, so just like we can pass literals, they're called. So in our case, this is a literal number or a literal string as variables into our functions. We can also pass variables into our functions, which you probably understand. So I could say my first number equals 3, and then I can do my first number, and what will we see if
You'll see 49.
you still see 49, right? So I can pass variables in to a function. But I can also pass a function in as a variable into a function. So for example, I could create, and we'll just take the very simple case where I have a function that's called my first number, and it doesn't take any parameters, and it just returns 3. So if I do that, what am I going to get back?
Same thing.
Same thing. So now, this is where anonymous, so technically I'm still putting into this whatever the return value is, so it's literally being replaced with 3. But if I do this, I'm now passing in a function for x. So I'm not passing in the returned value of 3, but instead I'm passing this entire piece of code. All 3 of these lines are getting passed in as x. Okay. So if I wanted to call x, what do I need to do? What do I need to change here? So this is actually a function, so we have to do that. You see? Because now x is being passed in as a function, so we have to actually call the function. This is called an anonymous function, because essentially what it's saying is, I don't care what you end up giving me, I'm going to call whatever your function does at this point in time, which allows you to be able to do some interesting things. Like, for example, I could pass in y with the expectation that what I'm going to get here is some number, and then what I'm actually going to do here is 3 times y. Okay, so it's going to be 3 times y plus y is what we'll end up getting, which is some crazy, like,
Makes sense.
but the point is 2 things. So the first is, in this simple case, we can pass in, because we're not calling the function, we're actually just naming the function as the parameter, we can pass in the entire function, which again with substitution, we're passing in all 3 of these lines of code as x, and so x at that point is my whole first number function, so I have to call x. I can't just do this. And I can prove all these pieces. So let's start here. So when I call sum right now, I'm going to get, and you can see it's literally all 3 of those lines of code and then the number 46.
Right.
What it's doing is concatenating the entirety of this code with the number 46. So you can see that happening right here. So if I want to instead do the result of x, which is 3, I need to call x, which will give me back 49.
I was just about to ask that. So if you were to put, you go back to the code. If you were to put in the console.log quotations around my first number,
Yeah.
put the string out there.
Yep. That'll give you, well, so that's just because x is not a function though. If I do this, you get my first number 46, because it's literally the word my first number 46, not the function my first number 46.
It's not as bad as you explained it last time.
Yeah, it takes a little while too. Like, you have to do this multiple times before it really starts to make sense. So then, just to prove the point, I can take in some number and I can multiply 3 times some number. And then in the case of sum, when I'm calling my first number, I can pass in some number, which is y in our case. Yeah, so it's a big number because it's 3 times 46 plus 46, which is apparently 184. Questions about that? Okay. All right, so that's functions. Let's talk for a minute about conditionals. Somebody remember what conditionals are?
Yep.
What's an example?
If else.
If else. So what's if I wanted to create a variable called color. Whoa, what was that about? Broken everything apparently. Hold on one second. Okay, so if I create a variable called color, and for the moment I'm going to make it blue, but imagine that it can be any color in a set of colors. So it can be blue, it can be red, it can be brown, it can be green, whatever. So there's going to be a color, and I want to test if it's blue, and if it's blue, I want to respond, go Michigan. Okay. So in this case, how would I check and then console.log out go Michigan if it's blue and I don't know, Tigers forever if it's not. So how would we do that? So if it's blue, I want to say go Michigan. If it's not blue, I want to say Tigers forever.
So name your function again.
So you could do it with a function. So we can create a function. So what do you want to? And
Okay, I guess that's not the way.
no, you can. That's totally fine. I don't. This is just a little more complicated, but we can go this route.
Okay. Function is named sports.
Sure.
Parentheses. Brackets. Drop it down.
Yep.
If color equals blue.
Why do I use 3 equal signs there?
Do not remember.
Checks the type and the value.
It checks the type and the value. So it's going to check that color is both a string in this case, and it has the characters BLUE.
So if you put 1, what would it do?
So if you put 1, well, what does that do? What is 1? What?
Assignments.
Yeah. What does 1 equal sign usually do?
Oh,
It's going to assign color to blue, so it will always be true in this case.
right.
So we don't want to do that. That is a common mistake that people make syntactically. So if you did 2, in this case it would work. But if we were doing, instead of color, if we were doing number, that would give us true. Because 1 is 1, but it's not exactly the same, because 1 is a number and 1 is a string.
Gotcha.
So if you did 3 equals, that would not be true. So generally speaking, you just always want to do 3. Yeah.
You said it's a common mistake. I would probably did.
Yeah. It's one of those things you get frustrated by because you can't understand how this is possibly not working the way you expect it to, and it's because you're assigning the variable in the conditional. So
color equals blue.
Yep.
If color equals blue 3 times.
Yep.
So return, I would say.
Yeah, so we need to do curly braces again. So curly braces represent we want to do things within this block of code based on what we're doing up here. So in sports, we say everything within those curly braces is going to be a part of the function sports. For our if statement, if it's color blue, when it's blue, we're going to do anything inside of these curly braces. So what do we want to do here?
Would we return?
We can return, sure.
Go Michigan. In the string.
Yeah, go Michigan. Okay.
And then under that,
Yep.
we would go else.
Yep. Tigers forever. Okay.
So why don't? Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I've seen exclamation point blue, which means if it's not blue, right?
Yeah, but that's not. So
Not the same.
no, you couldn't do You couldn't do
That's
this.
why I don't want to ask it.
What you can do is it's close. You can do this, which is to say color is not equal to blue, and then we would change our to.
Right.
Okay. We can also do sometimes, instead of using color, we'll just have a variable that is explicitly true or false. So if it's true, in that case you can do not, which is to say if color is false. Does that make sense? Yeah, so that's probably where you've seen that. Alright, but let's go back to our simple example. So if color is blue, then go Michigan, otherwise Tigers forever. So what is this going to do if I go look at my page right now? Nothing. So what do we need to do to actually make it log out to the console? Or go Michigan or Tigers forever? We have to call our function. Yep. So what's that going to do?
We need to put color, we need to call
Mm-hmm.
arguments in the function.
Yeah, we don't have it as an argument in a function, and that's absolutely correct, Josh. He's going to get lucky right now because color being defined up here is globally defining color. We're gonna talk about scoping as we move on. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. He got it right, but yeah, he got it right, but he got lucky because if instead of having color there, I put color down here, it will not work.
Gotcha.
Yep.
How do you do that in Nifty Truck, by the way, when you drag a line down?
If you press Shift Option and then press the arrow keys,
Oh, yeah.
it moves them. Yeah. At least I'm using RubyMine, which is not Atom, but it probably has the same set. So
So,
yeah.
Because I assigned it globally.
Because you assigned it globally,
Oh,
which
I know
is say
that.
it's available everywhere, right? Then it's available inside of the function because you declared it before you used it in the function.
so we can just call color in the function call down the bottom there.
Yeah. So the better way, which is to say the way that's like more reusable, is to put color as a parameter. And then we could do something like,
Okay, yeah.
right? Does that make sense? Okay, but still what's going to happen?
If we didn't,
So right now, what will happen if I reload the page?
nothing.
Nothing, because,
We haven't told it where to, I guess, put it kind of. So
Yeah.
I don't know what the correct.
yeah, so we haven't console logged it out, right? We haven't logged anything yet. So we can do console log and put it inside of there, or we could assign it to a variable and then console log the variable, but this will actually give us go mission. And then if we change it to something else, we get tires forever.
So scratch the, oh, you already did. You took the global, okay.
Yep, got rid of the scope. Yep, but if we had just to prove that point, then there is no parameter, so you just call it like that. We still get Go Michigan.
And then I'm going to change that, we're going to change the first variable that you said.
Yeah, so you could still change this to something else and it'll switch. But the problem is sports isn't really reusable anymore. Like it's always whatever the color was that you set higher up.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, okay. So that's conditionals. And the last thing is loops. So what are loops?
The other way you put it conditionals.
The other way
Like there was another way to do it.
to do conditionals in general. So you can use what are called switch statements or case statements in JavaScript. That would be a little bit different in that you name. So here, let's just go. I don't use these very often. Case statement. Switch statement. But you're going to name. So you have switch, and then your expression here would be in our case color, and then you can do case X, which would be in our case blue, and then you'd put in console or return Go Michigan. Break case, in our case it would be.
So if you weren't going to use a function to do conditionals.
Oh, that way, yes. So if you didn't use a function, you would just do this. And then you don't return anything because there's nothing to return. So you either set this equal to a variable, so we could say right. So that would give us still tires forever. We change it to blue. Go Michigan. Or you could just, the simplest way would just be, in this case, console.log. Go Michigan if it's blue, and console.log tires forever if it's not. That'll also work. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, so putting inside the function, it's slightly more complicated in that you're wrapping it, but the benefit is you can reuse it over and over and over again. So, yeah, so generally speaking, you want to put everything inside of a function. You might have variables inside of your function, but you basically want everything inside of a function. Okay. Keeps your code smaller and more readable and all those things. All right, so last one, because we haven't gone over this much, is loops. So what is a loop?
Doing something over and over and over.
Doing something over and over and over again. So generally speaking with loops, you're going to start with an array of things. So in our case, let's create an array of colors. So how do I create an array? Does anybody remember this?
Equals square brackets.
Equals square brackets, yep. So and then we just comma separate strings. So we can say red, blue, brown, purple. Okay. So if I wanted to loop over the colors, and if it starts with B, I want to log out starts with B, and if it doesn't, then I want to say not blue or brown. How would we create a function like that? Or a loop rather, but yeah. So for a loop, so what would that loop look like?
For color and colors.
Yeah, for color in colors. So let's for the moment just console log out each of the colors just so we can see what that looks like. We might have gotten this wrong. Yep. So in is for objects. That's one. So it's of. So in is used for objects, and so it'll loop over the key and the value, as opposed to in our case we just have values, but the key in an array is the index, which is 0, 1, 2, 3. So what we were printing out was the index and not the, but yeah. So okay, so what is color of colors? So what is colors?
An array.
Right? Colors is right here. Right? Colors is an array of colors. So if we say for color of colors, what we're saying is that inside of these brackets, we want to, for each item in the array, we want to do something. And for us, it's going to be color. So on for the first item, we're going to console.log out the first item, and then we're going to go to the second item, we're going to log out the second item, and then we're going to go to the third item, we're going to log out the third item.
And because it's not a specified type of loop, it's going to keep going to stuff.
So for loops are specified as I'm going to loop over a set of things. In our case, it's an array of things.
But if you put like a loop for like while, would it do it while you set?
So while loops are different in that you have to tell it when to stop.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the value of for loops, is like you know that you have a specific set of things in an array, and it'll go to the end of the array.
Gotcha.
With the while loops, you have to, in addition to just doing this simple thing, you have to tell it when to stop.
Gotcha.
So, yeah. Does that make sense? So we're just
So for each color in this array of colors, list out the colors.
Yep. So for each, basically what it's saying is for each color in the array of colors, I want color to represent that place, and I want to do this set of code on that item one at a time. So I want to do something with red, and then I want to do something with blue, and then I want to do something with brown, and then I want to do something with purple. And that thing that I'm going to do with each one of those items is contained inside of these brackets.
I think to help you understand this is to change color to X.
Yep.
So really clearly understand that it's just a random variable.
Yep. So we'll just call it O. O. You see that? So, or you can call this item. Item.
Oh.
Those all do the same thing. There is nothing special about those names. We are just saying loop over the array of colors, and for each iteration, I want to name the variable at that point to be whatever's on the left-hand side.
Yeah, same colors and colors. It's a little bit confusing.
Yeah.
I was also trying to I'm wondering why W3 schools was using I. I was like, what is the significance of the I?
Yeah.
They just use that as their random.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's very common to use I in for loops because it's like iteration or integer or
Gotcha.
IJK. They're just commonly used in for loops in computer science, but yeah, but it's whatever.
I think to your question with the while loop, like with some other loops, you have to be really specific about this is where you can start, this is where you can end.
Yeah.
Whereas this one is like a program already, like it already knows quite a lot.
Yeah.
Once you give it an array, it knows where to end.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And these, Back in my day, JavaScript didn't have this type of for loop. This is relatively recent. This came out in like the last 3 years. So before that, you had to do that far more specific for loop, which you guys will experience in the labs. I'm just trying to give you this is the easiest and best practice way of doing it. So
Gotcha.
yeah. We're skipping the hard stuff, even though it might not seem like it. Okay, so does the loops make sense to people? Is there anything else I can answer about? Okay.
Got it so far.
Cool. All right, so I will do one very quick thing.
Just a second.
Yep.
So when you say that you're applying the code to each of the variables, or
Yep.
like the colors, what code are we applying?
Anything inside of these brackets. So
Okay, so but there we're just calling
in this case, we're just logging whatever it is. But you could, so let's say concat, let's create a variable called C, and we're going to say ADS plus so what do you think that's going to log out?
the colors.
Mm-hmm.
Red
Is a beautiful
Blue.
color.
red.
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
So it'll do each one of them. So you see how it applies it to each one of them one at a time?
Yeah.
And that's why they're on separate lines. Because it's not doing it all at once, it's doing them one at a time.
Okay.
So this is the same, right? This doing the for loop this way is the same as typing red is a beautiful color, blue is a beautiful color, brown is a beautiful color, purple is a beautiful color. Or really, it's more like colors 0 plus colors 1 plus colors 2 plus colors 3. Does that make sense? So instead of having to write all this code, I just write a loop and it'll do it for each one of them.
Okay.
Make sense? Cool. All right. So yeah, we'll call that quits for JavaScript for today, and we'll use the rest of class time to just work on your sites. So the easiest way to get started on that is get back to that responsive directory. Make sure if you run git status that you are on your branch, which should just be a branch by your name, and you should just be able to open up responsive and start building your website. When you're ready, you can git push origin, your branch name, and you should be able to go check it out. I might have missed something earlier on setting this up, but we should be able to go to responsive.flatiron-dc.com/ whatever your branch name is, and I think that worked. Yep, so you can see like the hello is already out there. So if you go to responsive.flatiron-dc.com/ your name, then you should be able to see what you're working on in real time on the actual internet. Cool? Yes.
Can I show you something? Real quick?
Yeah.
You're missing an bracket, which it actually probably is telling you. So let me show you that. If you go back to the website, you see there it says unexpected ticket else.
Right there.
Yeah, so it's saying there's a problem with something to do with your bracketing. So if we go back to the easiest way to find these types of things, okay, so if you click on that ending, just click next to it. See how it underlines this one here?
Shows you.
What it's saying is that one starts here, this one ends here. But you should be starting one after the Oh. So no, you still need that one, because you need one to start your function.
I was gonna say, I need one there.
So,
Yeah.
and then that one did it too. So now you,
Do that.
okay, so now if you click there, click next to it, and do it.
Yeah.
See the underline is now next to the if, and then
That was that.
and that's
Yeah, that
else,
was-
and then you're not closing the function. Yeah, but the problem here is you're going to kill your computer. You've gotten yourself into an infinite recursive loop scenario. Because you're pretty close, you can leave it. You see, you're calling sports, but sports is inside of the brackets that started the function sports. So sports is going to keep calling itself for all of time.
Okay.
Because you'll get to the end of it and then it'll call itself again, you get to the end of it, it'll call itself again. So all you need to do is move that down outside of the brackets.
So it'd be like
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Not true.
That'd be scary.
But that's where indentation is so important here too. So like what you really should do is keep your brackets in line with their starts. So if you press tab there, and then anything inside of them you should tab over one. So like in this,
So like,
so if can stay where it was probably, because it's tabbed inside a function. But console.log line, yeah, that one, tab that one. And then the
I see
so
what you're
else tab that one. Yeah, so now, and then bring sports back to the beginning. Yeah, so now it's like, okay, function and sports are on the same level. The if is doing the stuff that's inside of it, else is doing the stuff that's inside of it. Yeah.
to something.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
It's one of those, like, it's incredibly useful to spend the time to keep that indentation right.
I'm thinking I literally don't have the right verbiage. It's literally like brackets in the wrong place.
Yeah. That's how it goes, man. That's syntax errors.
Adam doesn't fix that for me.
It doesn't know. So it might have fixed the opening. There might be a way for you to fix the opening of the bracket with the if, but it doesn't know where it should be starting and ending brackets necessarily.
JS Fiddle will tell me. No, JS Int will tell me.
Yeah, the lint will just say something's broken, which is what the browser said.
Right.
And it did tell you, like, hey, you're missing this if statement here,
Right.
but yeah, I can try.
I feel like I use Virtual Studio at home just to practice, and I think it has some feature where.
It will start and end it probably as you're typing, which is
Yeah, it will.
yeah. So if I go back to that example. So like if we're here and I delete this one, it knows something's wrong.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't know how to fix it though. So I can option enter, which is supposed to try and fix the things,
Oh.
but it doesn't know how to fix it. It just knows there's something wrong. If I forget to end that, same thing. Because it doesn't know, right? Like it doesn't know if it should end it before or if it should end it after.
Right.
You were in an infinite recursive looping scenario, but sometimes you actually want to be in an infinite recursive looping scenario.
Right.
So it doesn't know, right? So you have to tell it what you want it to do.